Hey guys, Fox Protocol Mining here, coming at you with a new video from the Fox Den. This video I'm going to cover how to calculate your kilowatt hour rate for your mining profitability calculators, and I'm going to share just a few tips since we're coming into the summertime as to what I use to cool my operation and the age-old question of whether or not to use air conditioning. So hopping into this, guys, I'm based out of Ohio, and I use Arcadia to help me determine my electric rate. What I mean by that is Arcadia is a third-party platform that here in Ohio we have the ability to pick our energy supplier. So Arcadia automatically finds the lowest supply rate for me in the state and applies that to my bill. So it ensures that I'm always getting the cheapest electric possible here in the state of Ohio. This varies a little bit depending on your state and how they do things and what the laws are, but I just wanted to share this with you guys because this platform could potentially save you just a little bit on your energy bills. There is a link referral down in the description that would help me out a little bit if you signed up. You don't have to use this, but it's free to sign up and it could potentially help you save a little. So I just figured I'd share that with the community. But let's jump right in, guys. So how do you figure out your kilowatt hour rate? What's called the all-in rate, which is exactly what you pay for every kilowatt hour. First thing you want to do is you want to pull up your statements, and you want to see the total amount that you paid and the total kilowatt hours that you paid. Now, depending on your statement, these numbers should be right on the top somewhere, pretty easy to find, but you may have to dig a little to find your kilowatt hour number. Basically, what you want to do is you want to enter in your electric rate into the calculator. So 105.54 was my monthly bill, and divide that by kilowatt hours used. Mine was 9,750. Hit equals, and that will bring up your electric rate. This is what I pay for electricity here in USD, so that's just what I'm paying. So whatever number that comes out of here is going to be your all-in electric rate. Now, really quick, don't confuse your supply rate with your all-in electric rate. Supply is how much you're paying for the electricity that you actually use, but if you scope out my actual statement here, you'll see that I'm being billed for delivery and supply. So the difference between that is supply is the energy that I'm actually using, and the delivery total is effectively the cost to the infrastructure to get my electricity to my doorstep. So you have to bring those two numbers together and then divide by the total kilowatt hours to get your what's called the all-in electric rate, which this is the electric rate that you would put into a profitability calculator like whattomine.com to tell you exactly how profitable your rig will be. That's it in a nutshell, guys. It's pretty simple to figure out, but I just wanted to make sure that everyone makes sure that you are getting the actual electric rate, your what's called the all-in electric rate. That way you're getting an accurate profitability. Now I'm going to jump in, guys. It is back to summertime, so links will be down in the description for everything I show you today. But it's a great time to do your thermal paste, change your GPU fans, air out, get some canned air and blow your card radiators out. Now's a wonderful time for that because you want your cards to be as efficient as possible because it's getting hot. I just wanted to cover a few things here that I personally utilize. I don't use box fans anymore. I only use utility fans or high velocity fans. They're a little pricier, but when it comes to amount of air moved per watt, these are much more cost effective than box fans, and these bad boys stand up to heat a lot better than box fans do. Generally speaking, my operation gets pretty hot in the summer, and my box fans, I would see about one of them die every season because they would just dry out, I guess, and they just couldn't handle the heat. So I've switched to these utility fans, haven't had an issue yet thus far, and they just move so much more air, so it's a lot nicer, especially if you have like one or two rigs that have problems when the ambient temperature spikes. I definitely recommend these. If you're looking for super efficiency, you guys don't want to buy a fan for every single rig. The 120 mil fans are the best bet to go. For energy efficiency, for moving air, there is no better option. These are going to move a lot more air per watt, because I think one of these moves like 60 CFMs and it only uses maybe 3 or 4 watts an hour. So, and you can stack these and you can move a lot of air. And more specifically, you're moving targeted air, which means they're just moving the air across the cards. You're not moving a bunch of extra air you don't need to move. These are really nice. I use these in conjunction with my utility fans because I've got a lot of cards, so I need to move a lot of air. And I just really like these. Keep in mind, guys, when you're buying these, you want to make sure you're getting higher RPM and the higher airflow. You don't want to get low RPM 30 CFM 120 mils, because you can buy the cheap Chinese ones and they're really just not worth it. They die really quickly. They don't really move any air. So be a stickler with these when you're buying them. Either get on to a couple YouTubes like you are now and look for the recommended fans, or just make sure if you're looking for fans that you're paying attention to fan RPM and airflow. These are definitely not the best ones that you can buy. These are just the ones that I happen to buy because they tend to be pretty availability wise. I don't have trouble finding them, and they're a little bit better than the basic Chinese fans. One thing that gets pretty heavily overlooked by a lot of people is when you're buying a rack, don't buy a rack that has a solid base or a solid rack, because you're actually going to make hot spots in between your rigs, because air can't flow. Heat wants to go up, heat wants to rise. So if you're buying an actual rack, definitely buy something that's open, so that way you're not trapping any heat. Also, guys, if you've been noticing that GPU frames are getting really expensive these days, these racks still haven't really increased in price, and you can actually just attach your GPUs directly to these racks. I've even seen some 3D printed mounts for these racks that really add some style, that are fully customizable with your logos, or maybe you want to label your GPUs, you know, GPU 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, etc. For each motherboard. You can actually do that too, and they're pretty cost effective. I don't have a supplier right now, so unfortunately I cannot give you a link. I am working on that, and I will add a link later if I can find one. But these are just a really nice cost-effective way to expand. You can probably get away with about 50 or so GPUs on a rack like this, probably even more if you had a good cooling system. So, you know, this is just a nice cost-effective option, because I'm seeing, you know, the Veta frames go for really, really expensive amounts. And even basic frames these days are going for $50, $60, and they're only made for, you know, 6 to 8 GPUs. So, you know, for something that can hold 50 plus GPUs for $90, it's a pretty good investment. These are labeled as kitchen storage racks, but they work really well for mining rigs as well. And also, guys, jumping into the big age-old question, should I use air conditioning or not? As a rule of thumb, guys, I do not use air conditioning to cool my rigs. However, I do realize that depending on your climate, you may not have a choice. I know in Phoenix and Houston and Miami, you know, it's not uncommon to see 100-degree weather. So in the instances like that, you can still run an effective fan cooling operation at those temperatures. But depending on how your location's laid out, maybe you're in a lease or a rental and you can't modify the location the way that you want to, you may end up having to use air conditioning. My thing with that, guys, is if you're mining, you're paying to heat the air as it is, and if you're running air conditioning, you're also paying to cool the air. So it's not efficient, it's not the best way to do it, but I do realize that depending on your situation, you may not have a choice. So guys, if you're seeing temperatures below 90 degrees Fahrenheit, you can get away with just using a fan setup. You know, move as much air as you possibly can, and you'll and exhaust the air properly, and you shouldn't ever need air conditioning. But I do realize, depending on your locale, you know, air conditioning might be something you have to utilize. But you know, for 1,000 to 1,500 watts for 10,000 BTUs, whereas, you know, I can move the same amount of air with 2 floor fans that cost me $100 and use a fraction of that electricity. You just have to come in and determine what's best for your setup and your operation. But I figured I would touch on that. And lastly, guys, for inspiration, I did want to share a quick chart with you. Uh, Whenever you want to figure your cooling, I generally say you want to have a target temperature in mind, but keep in mind to fluctuate that temperature with your ambient. So, for example, I try to be no more than 10 degrees over ambient temperature. So if it's 80 degrees Fahrenheit, I try to keep it under 90 degrees Fahrenheit in my mining operation, and that's just my rule of thumb. But as ambient temperature isn't something we can control, there are other factors that you can control and other factors that you may want to take into effect. So your enclosed space, so if you're using a grow tent or you're in a basement or a shed or whatever enclosure you're in, keep in mind that all that space needs to be cooled, not just where your mining rig is sitting, because otherwise your ambient temperature will continue to increase if you're not exhausting hot air properly. The grouping, this goes into spacing between your cards, how close your rigs are actually together, things like that. The tighter the grouping, the more air you're going to need to move, because they're going to heat that air faster and faster. Believe it or not, altitude also does have a pretty decent sized impact in cooling, whether you're right at sea level or you're in Denver. So this will be something to consider. Pulse operation isn't something I really take into account for mining, because your rigs are probably always under 100% load, so that's not something that really matters. Cooling air, so how much air you're moving, the velocity of the air, and CFMs. And limited temperature rise is, again, guys, what temperature you're shooting for over ambient, so that way you can always ensure that you're cooling effectively and efficiently. Generally speaking, I don't set a target temperature, meaning that I don't want to say that I want to keep my operation at 70 degrees year round, because I rely on ambient temperature to cool my rigs. So I would have to employ air conditioning and things like that to maintain a target temperature. So I just go with a certain number of degrees over ambient is what I shoot for when I'm cooling my operation. But guys, that is the nutshell. Like I said, links for everything will be down below. Please, guys, comments, questions, concerns, criticisms, always welcome. If this video helped you out and you found it informative, please like, subscribe, and share. But that's pretty much it for me today, guys. So this is Fox Protocol Mining coming at you from the Fox Den, and I am signing off.